Hey everyone, Chris Sheeran here in our Yes Network studios, and I want to bring in our analyst Jack Curry into this discussion. Jack, baseball is back. I cannot be more happier to have you on the phone and talking about spring training. Just let me know where you are right now. Give me a sense. Give me a feel.
Oh, Chris, I'm glad you asked that question. If you had a satellite image of me right now, I'm standing on Field 3 at George M. Steinbrenner Field. It is baked in sunshine, and I would be the equivalent of the first base coach right now. There's nobody else on the field, so I figured I'd amble into the first base coach box here so you and I could talk, and I'll just soak up the smell of the grass and the warmth of the sun. And as you said, this is the best time of the year when baseball is back. You can't be more excited to watch it and to talk about it, and you and I are fortunate enough that we get to do that.
Absolutely, buddy. And my commute here into the Yes Network studios was reminiscent of Rocky IV when he went to Russia to train to fight Drago. So I hate you right now. But let's.
Oh, I rubbed it in. I've got about probably 40 or 50 degrees higher than you right now, but we won't talk about that.
All right, let's talk about baseball. Everybody wants to hear about the Yankees, and Joe Girardi just held his press conference to kick off pitchers and catchers today down there at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. And Jack, one of the first things we have to talk about is this rotation. You know, you have Tanaka, you have Pineda, and you have Sabathia. They're pretty much locks unless they get injured down there in spring training. And then it's, 5 or 6 guys for the last 2 spots. Let me just ask you, do you think Adam Warren, we heard Joe say that he was going to be stretched out and he was going to start in spring training. Do you think he's the safe bet to take one of these spots?
Chris, I actually don't, and here's why. I think Warren's versatility works against him in a way in terms of being one of those starters. I think the fact that he has done both roles will give Girardi a security blanket coming out of the bullpen. Warren being a guy you can use in the 5th inning, you could use him in the 8th inning, and he's done both jobs and not worry about it. The other guys, though, they have done both, and Severino obviously was a dominator out of the bullpen last year. I don't think you have the same feeling for them in doing both. The other thing about Adam Warren for me is, at a certain point, you are what your statistics say you are. This guy has pitched over 200 games in the major leagues. I believe it's over 200, and he's made about 20 starts. He's a reliever. He has been a reliever in the major leagues, and that's who I think the Yankees will make him this year. I think Girardi will say that he is in the competition, but I think he's more of a security blanket for a bullpen that's they're going to need to go to often. Warren is a guy they can put there and feel good about it.
Well, that's why I asked that question, Jack, and that's because, Warren does have that experience as a starter and with the Yankees, and, with the kids that are expected to maybe fill those last 2 roles, and with the 3 starters that are etched in stone right now, barring injuries, they've had injury issues. So does that kind of scare you that maybe you're not going to get a lot of length out of your starters, even though bringing Chapman back into the fold and that bullpen is strong at the back end?
I think every manager and every pitching coach, like Girardi and Rothschild are right now, you're hoping to get that length out of your starting rotation, and that was an issue for the Yankees last year. And as you just said, it's probably going to be an issue this year as well. CC Sabathia is not the durable pitcher he once was in Cleveland and briefly with Milwaukee, and then early on in his career with the Yankees. The Yankees watched Tanaka's innings. Pineda is a guy who can have really high pitch counts. Oh, and by the way, we haven't even gotten to the 4 and 5 spots, and whoever ends up winning those spots are younger pitchers, guys who, unless they shoot up and erupt this year, they're not guys you would say, I can count on Sessa for 7 innings per start. I can count on Chad Green or Mitchell for 7 innings per start. So I think that dynamic becomes very interesting in how far do you extend your starters, and it's why I'm reiterating that I do believe Warren becomes a bigger and more important weapon out of the bullpen.
All right, let's go to one of the main competitions for this team, and that's first base. We have first base and right field. Let's tackle first base first, Jack. They just signed Chris Carter to a deal. You have Tyler Austin also in the mix there, and, of course, Greg Bird. How do you see this shaking out, and what does that signing of Carter mean to you with this team?
I think Carter's a nice insurance policy for the Yankees. I mean, gosh, the guy hit 41 home runs last year, and he's out there on the unemployment line, basically, looking for a job. The Yankees got him at a very low contract number, and I think he becomes a guy who can face lefties and be your first baseman. I still think first base is Greg Bird's job. As long as he comes in and the shoulder is okay and he is the player he was in 2015, the Yankees will be thrilled. Chris, you and I both remember what this guy was. He's very quiet at the plate. He's very tranquil at the plate. He just looks comfortable. 11 homers in about 50 games going back a couple of years ago. So he should get at-bats. I think the guy who's impacted by Carter's arrival is Tyler Austin. Now, Joe Girardi in his press conference earlier today said Austin is in the hunt for the starting job at first base, and managers are going to say things like that, but I don't see that happening. I think that there's a platoon at first base. I think it's Bird and Carter, and I don't think Bird sits against every lefty either. I would like to see Bird get the bulk of the at-bats, but Carter could change that. I mean, Carter could hit 2 home runs and against the lefty, and then he faces the next 3 lefties because he's that kind of streaky hitter.
You hit the nail on the head, Jack. When we saw him a couple of years back when Bird came up, he was smooth for sure. Now let's go out into right field, and you have Aaron Judge and you have Aaron Hicks. It's a battle of Aarons out there. And, now while everyone wants to see Aaron Judge succeed, Jack, he has to have a great spring training in order to make this team. Do you think, because we've heard Joe Girardi say in the past he likes versatility, Hicks, if he does impress in spring training, is a switch hitter, do you think he's the safer bet?
It's a great question, Chris. I think the Yankees are committed to giving Aaron Judge the first crack and making it an extended crack. Meredith Marakovits did an interview with Hal Steinbrenner early in the offseason where he said Aaron Judge is our right fielder. So when the owner says that, you get the inclination that the organization has had these discussions, and this is the way they feel about that position and about that player. And he needs to get his chance. He needs to go out there and get X number of at-bats and prove that position is his. Chris, he struggled last year. We all know that. 42 strikeouts and 84 at-bats. I mean, that's abysmal, and he needs to clean that up. I think Hicks looms as a nice 4th outfielder, a switch hitter, a guy with some speed, a guy who's got a good arm. He can play all 3 spots. So I think that Judge deserves a long look out there. Now, if we're in June and he's hitting 180 and he's striking out 40% of the time, then obviously the Yankees have to make some decisions. But I think if you're talking about this kid as one of your best prospects, this can't be a 100 at-bat look. You've got to give him a chance.
Part of the reason why Joe Girardi said during his press conference that he's excited about this year is all the youngsters coming up. So hopefully Judge will be the opening day right fielder for the New York Yankees. Moving on, another pickup for them in the offseason, Jack, that's Matt Holliday. A question was brought up to Joe earlier about leadership in the clubhouse. Mark Teixeira is gone. Alex Rodriguez is gone. Carlos Beltran is gone. How does Holliday fill that void?
Chris, after the Yankees signed Holliday, I reached out to some people who cover the Cardinals on an everyday basis, and the first thing they talked about, beyond the 7 times that he's been an All-Star, beyond the World Series ring, was just the kind of influence that this guy had on his teammates. And obviously, you got to be a talented player too. You could be the happiest and most optimistic player in the world, and if you hit 150, you won't have a job anymore. So I think Holliday's work ethic and what he has done and what he has accomplished will just be a calming influence on the Yankees in that clubhouse. And I've seen this, you've seen this, you walk around that clubhouse, and if Derek Jeter's the hardest working guy in the clubhouse and you're some 22 or 25-year-old kid watching that rubs off on you. I think the Yankees are going to see some of that with Holliday. I think this was a shrewd signing by the Yankees. I always thought that when they added a DH type that it would be on a 1-year deal, and I think they got a good deal with Holliday, who, if he stays healthy, I think he will be a very productive player for them.
I know it's a small sample size, but based on his 8 games at DH last year, he hit .368. He hit .246 overall in 110 games, but .368 as a DH. Let's move on, Jack. Ellsbury and Gardner at the top of the lineup. That came up as well on the first day of spring training down there at Tampa. And do you think that ship has sailed with those two at the top of the lineup, or do you think the Yankees, based on their performance here in spring training, need to go back to that a little bit?
Chris, Bob Lorenz and I were in the studio, and Brian Cashman was a guest on Hot Stove, and when he almost volunteered the thought that the Yankees might break up Ellsbury and Gardner at 1-2, I found that very interesting, because I don't think a GM just suddenly blurts that out in January unless there's been a lot of talk about it. All that being said, when you start to look at that Yankee lineup, if Ellsbury and Gardner can be some semblance of what the Yankees expect them to be, then yes, of course you want them to be 1-2. The problem is that they've both struggled. And I look at Ellsbury, he signed that 7-year, $150+ million contract, and even Ellsbury would say that he hasn't lived up to what the Yankees expected from him. I think the Yankees will tinker in spring training. I'm not saying 100% I believe that they will break those two guys up, because I don't know what the scenario would be without those guys being 1 and 2. Do you hit Gardner first and then hit somebody like Headley second who can hit the ball to all fields? Do you go Ellsbury 1 and then Headley and Gardner 9? I think if those guys come out and have a pretty solid spring, there's still a chance that the Yankees go to that dance one more time with them in the 1 and 2 spot. And by the way, Chris, you got to run a little more, both of them. I know they're getting older, and I know it's wear and tear on your body. A part of what would make those guys dynamic is just irritating pitchers and catchers by running more, and both of them have gotten away from that part of their game.
That's the only thing that makes sense, Jack, if you have those guys 1-2 in your lineup. That's an excellent point out of you. Last one before we let you go, and that is something that you asked Joe Girardi at the press conference earlier, and that was he's in the last year of his contract. You know, he said it's a year to be excited about this team, excited about all the young players coming up through the system, but it also could be a year of transition while these players develop. Jack, what did you think of his response when you asked him that question?
A pretty predictable response, Chris. I've been around Joe a long time now, over 20 years, and I understand the baseball mentality of it's day to day, it's game to game. Joe Girardi is worrying about tomorrow's workout. He's not worried about 2018. But I still think that you've been in a place, this is 10 years now for Joe, you have to think about your future. When you're away from the field, of course, your wife might ask you, your friends might ask you. So I think it's on his mind. I do believe Joe when he says it won't impact how he does his job. I don't think Joe Girardi is suddenly going to make himself a different manager in the hopes of, quote, prolonging his time in New York or saving his time in New York. I think he'll go out. I think he'll manage the way he's always managed, and he has had a very good relationship with Brian Cashman and with Yankees ownership. And I think as the season wears on, they will come to a decision about when they might meet and talk about the future. One thing within his answer that I found interesting, Chris, is he said he won't reach out to ownership and seek some kind of clarity. So it also tells you that this is a two-part answer. It's not just the Yankees saying, "Hey, Joe, do you want to come back and dance with us?" It's Girardi saying, do I want to come back and dance with them? So it looms over the Yankees for the entire season, but I think Girardi and the Yankee ownership, they're adept enough that they won't let this become a distraction or a story that'll get in the way of anything. And by the way, you play well, all of those other stories become secondary, and that's what I think Girardi was focusing on today. There's talent in this room, and he thinks it could be a solid season for the Yankees.
Jack, thank you very much for the time. You're in that first base coach box, so I want to see a lot of...
No, I moved to shallow right field.
Oh, now you're in...
satellite. I'm in shallow right field now.
See, I wanted you to be aggressive. I wanted you to turn some singles into doubles, and now you're in shallow right field. All right.
I'm in shallow right field just in case, this is about as far as I could hit a Major League Baseball. So that's where I'm standing right now.
Jack Curry wandering around on Field 3 down at George M. Steinbrenner Field, the complex down there. Jack, we thank you for your time. Baseball is back. Enjoy your time down there in Tampa with the Yankees.
All right, Chris, talk to you soon.
All right, there he goes, Jack Curry. We thank him for his time, and we thank you for watching this special spring training report with Jack Curry, who was down there listening to Joe Girardi's press conference to kick off pitchers and catchers down in Tampa.